Hi guys, welcome back to the Fight Podcast with Sharir Richmond.
Hi, how are you?
You did it again with me, Jan. Sharir, nice to have you back.
Nice to have you back.
I'm always here, I never left. I live in the studio. I sleep
him
in that corner over there. You see it?
I keep him in a little box.
Well, it's a cuddly box over there in the corner. Yeah. There's blankets in it. It's close to the heating system.
One more word, I'll take your blanket away.
Why would you take my blanket away? I think I do a great job here.
You're doing okay.
I'm doing fine. Let's talk about how you do your job.
All right.
You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so today I think we should focus about the MMA part, not the ICCS part. Okay?
Whatever you want. I'm good.
So basically, what do you think, or what would you say that MMA is made of? What are like the main martial arts that find their way into MMA?
Ground fighting, wrestling, and boxing.
Mm-hmm. So what if you say ground fighting? There's a lot of ground fighting. What do you mean by ground fighting?
Sambo or jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm. Luta Livre, Jiu-Jitsu, kind of the same.
Same thing.
Okay. Sambo is also, Sambo you do also standing up, right? It's not
Sambo
exclusively groundwork, right?
Not exclusively groundwork. They also have even strikes. They also strike in Sambo competitions.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, ever seen a Sambo competition?
I've never seen a full...
It's pretty badass.
I've just seen the groundwork.
They have headbutts. I mean, they have a lot of the leg locks that are illegal in jiu-jitsu competitions.
Mm-hmm.
Their wrestling is very good.
So would you think that Sambo is already in itself kind of like an MMA?
Yeah, that's why you see a lot of Sambo people dominating in MMA.
Mm-hmm. But also they do it from a very early age on, right?
They do it from a very early age, so the wrestlers. But,
I think most of the Dagestani fighters do Sambo, right?
Probably.
Yeah. So if you look at, for instance, Khabib's whole entourage, they all I think do Sambo as well, right?
Yeah, he was a Sambo world champion, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. How do you think Sambo compares to BJJ, for instance?
I think for MMA.
In general, but also for MMA?
Let's start for MMA, it's better.
Sambo is better than BJJ?
So is wrestling.
Because you assume it's not just exclusively groundwork, you also assume being hit? Or why do you think it's better?
I'll tell you the problem with BJJ. It's a great sport, and it's very useful in many cases for a lot of things. But doing strictly sports BJJ, you get used to the fact that you allow people a certain position,
mm-hmm.
right? Like, okay, you clap, bump our fists, and I sit in my butt. You sit in your butt in an MMA fight, you have a big problem, right? You sit in you're in your butt against a wrestler who could punch you, you have a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
But Sambo people, they never agree with that. They'll always fight that, always fight for the position. Like a dominant, like on top. They want your back.
Mm-hmm. Could you explain for the people who are not into grappling that much, why does one guy sit on the butt? Why does one stand up? How does it work? Why do they do that?
They do it because they want to sweep you from the bottom. They want to take you down that way, and also because they have bad wrestling.
Because they never stand up. Both of them don't.
Yeah.
So you would say Sambo is more into position fighting than in just the submissions, and that's why
they just have superior wrestling. They just have better wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the main thing.
And if you would compare
the groundwork itself, maybe jiu-jitsu would be a little bit better. As far as positioning, as far as flowing, but not as far as just a brute control. And as far as keeping you down or standing back up again.
So you mean if you could only learn one in general, you would pick Sambo because it has more range in the wrestling department, and so it's more applicable for the street?
Personally?
Yeah.
Probably. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that, again, a lot of people might not agree with me, but jiu-jitsu is really great, but I think they just also had much better PR than Sambo, especially in the United States. Maybe the fact that Sambo is Russian, I don't know, maybe that played a goal in it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But just look at, numbers don't lie. Look at the fighters. Look who's winning in a lot of cases, It's Sambo people or wrestlers.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, jiu-jitsu is great, but it has its limitations.
I've heard some fighters lately talk about the role of judo in MMA. What do you think? Because some of the Sambo guys also do judo. What do you think judo?
It's not that they do judo. They have a lot of similar takedowns.
Okay.
Because they have their upper body has a gi.
Mm-hmm.
What I think about judo, I think judo is great. I think that it's less effective than MMA. for MMA, you do see once in a while a person who comes from judo to MMA and he's successful, but not that many. If you look at wrestlers and sambo, there's much more, much more.
So the idea is also because of the takedowns, you like it, but it's not as applicable for ground fighting.
In judo, you have a lot of sweeps and a lot of hip throws, which are not very very good for MMA, and it's all of it almost relies on their gi. And in MMA, you need a lot of obviously go behinds for take the back, and you need a lot of double legs, single legs, knee picks, things like that. That you don't have much of that in judo. I think that they used to have. I'm not a judo expert. I think they used to have, but I think over the years the rules changed. And I think a judo guy who I respect a lot told me this once that they used to have like double legs in judo and things like that. But I think that the reason why they stopped was because sambo people would go to compete in judo and kick their ass. So they had to make the rules, understandably, in favor of judo people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you just talked about the gi, which is the suit that they wear for competing, do you think wearing this suit is like a drawback if you practice with it compared to, because in MMA you're not allowed to wear gi?
No, it's not a drawback if you want to practice with it, but you have to practice without as well. It's like a totally different style of grappling with or without one. So if all you do is with the gi, it's not good for MMA at all. But there's nobody who does only gi and then does MMA. I've never seen that.
Also, I've seen a lot of people who are in, let's say, law enforcement who also practice with gi. So they are used to, maybe it's with, maybe you can grab clothing, whatever. What do you think is, how well does gi fighting translate to real world fighting, not MMA?
It doesn't.
It doesn't?
It doesn't, unless you could use some chokes in the winter. That you could use.
With like a thick jacket or something.
Yeah. But apart from that, in my eyes, it doesn't really apply. You went to the police officers. The police officers should be practicing in two ways. One, just like gym clothes for some stuff for the comfort so they can actually listen in class and practice. And second, with their uniform and how they are supposed to, whatever they wear at work, that's how they should be practicing. Because that's how they're going to fight. They're not going to fight in a gi. So why would you practice in a gi?
Yeah. The main idea here is, do you think that there is a huge difference between people who, you said you would prefer practicing without a gi in general, these martial arts, because you don't get used to the grabs to the clothing, right? So would you say you would kind of you would not look into disciplines that use the gi, or would you think, okay, you can do it as long as you also take these?
As long as you also take these. Look, if you love martial arts, you love it with a gi or without a gi. But you should know, it depends on what you're looking to achieve. What's your goal? If your goal is to be an MMA fighter, then a gi is a waste of time. Right? But if your goal is just to practice some martial arts because you like it, then do whatever you want.
And so it's about setting the wrong incentives. With a gi, you can do stuff you can't do without, so you shouldn't be practicing it if your goal is to fight without one.
Exactly.
With wrestling, for instance, there's no gis involved.
No.
So I'm I think I can kind of judge your idea here, but if you compare Sambo then with all the takedowns, with the ground fighting, to wrestling, how do you think those for MMA? Yeah,
I think you'll be surprised, but I think Sambo.
You think Sambo?
Yeah. I think Sambo, just because of their background with strikes and with leg locks. But the next up to it, wrestling.
I am surprised, yeah.
If you had a wrestler who also did boxing, then I would say that.
But Sambo is also exclusively with gi, right?
Yeah.
But they have something similar to
They have a lot of, the thing is because they don't have pants on, they have like shorts. So as far as all the double legs and single legs, they're really quick with that. So the upper body, they have a gi, but the lower body doesn't. So they're very good with their shots.
What do you think? Are there other disciplines that do very good clinch work while standing?
Wrestling and Sambo and Yeah, those do the very good.
Those are the most common ones.
Well, of course, you have Thai boxing who does clinch work as well.
But do they actually do? I know they do a lot of kicking, but do they actually do takedowns from there?
There is takedowns in Thai boxing, but compared to wrestling or sambo,
very little,
nothing.
Okay, how would you think the like kicking martial arts compare? Like, would you recommend doing them?
Absolutely. Why not?
It's not why not. It's just
like kickboxing. Or?
Yeah, let's say Thai boxing or Muay Thai in general.
Muay Thai is really tough. Muay Thai, they're tough fighters. You don't see so many Muay Thai guys moving on to MMA though. Kickboxing, yes, right. That guys do both, but strictly
like
Muay Thai,
the like the Dutch style kickboxing.
Yeah. But strictly Muay Thai, you don't see a lot. And even though they're really tough, it's because I think their stand-up style, how they have their hands forward and their front leg up all the time, they'll get taken down really easy. That's my opinion. Yeah.
Do you think it also is like a cultural thing that they only compete in Muay Thai as well?
You have to ask them that.
I was just wondering, maybe you know. And also, if you look at stuff like Taekwondo, for instance, how would you think those would fare in a fight?
Not too well. Not too well. But there is like Taekwondo has like 2 or 3 really dangerous kicks, and I think like I've had a guy who came from a background in Taekwondo, training with us. I think he was some kind of European champion. I don't remember exactly what, but he had a deadly roundhouse kick, like mule kick. Spinning.
The spinning back
exactly,
kick. Yeah.
He would hit people right in the liver with that all day long, and that's one of the most dangerous kicks, if you ask me. You have to be it's timing, and you have to be really good with that kick. But if you got that kick dialed down,
it's dangerous.
Oh yeah, you take people down all day with that kick. So if you did that, you have those kicks, and then you did boxing and some form of wrestling and grappling. Yeah, sure, you could use that. But just Taekwondo without any boxing, I mean, you'll be in a big problem.
I was just thinking about the as you said with BJJ, there's like an agreement maybe, where I'm not sure if that fares that well in a street fight, where if you're both focusing on the kicks and there's not someone who's shooting for your legs, there's no one boxing
in Taekwondo.
In Taekwondo,
yeah, there's no boxing in Taekwondo, so it's already out of the picture just because of that.
So you could like look at some of the kicks, but it's not basically.
You could take some of the kicks. That's what I was saying, because they're really good at that. But as a whole, it's not good enough because there's no boxing.
How would you think boxing without any add-ons would fare in street fighting?
Great. I think boxers are one of the most dangerous fighters in the world.
You think boxers are more dangerous than wrestlers?
Maybe not. I mean, that depends on the fighter.
Depends on yeah. I
mean, if a wrestler wants to take you down, he'll take you down. So but a wrestler with boxing together, he's almost the ultimate weapon. If you ask me.
So you think that would be sufficient as like MMA basis?
Yeah. Oh,
because wrestling has very little, like the ground fighting works different than other disciplines, right?
They know about control. Once he puts you down, getting up is going to be really hard. Because wrestlers, one thing, they don't agree to stay down, right? And jiu-jitsu people do. They have a habit of staying on their back. So it's one thing fighting off your back when there's no strikes. Nobody trying to elbow your face off. And there's another thing when someone's trying to elbow your face off. It just turns the whole thing into a very, very different game. Very different game.
Also, I think because the goal is different in BJJ, for instance, and in wrestling. In wrestling, there's competition rules. Maybe you could say something about the difference.
There's a lot of different rules depending on...
Especially on the ground, I mean.
Yeah, so if you're on your back, you lost.
That's different in jiu-jitsu.
Basically, that's why it's so much more dynamic. It's constant. Sometimes you see jiu-jitsu, especially with a gi, like, they could slow things down, like really slow things down in a competition.
You can breathe a lot there, because you can.
Not with a gi, without a gi, it's a little less, but especially with a gi, though, it can slow things down. Where you're wrestling, you can't do that at all.
The first time I've seen wrestling, I was a little confused because there was someone laying like a starfish on their stomach, and that's something you never see in grappling. There was like a defensive strategy. I'm like, okay, that's new.
Yeah, so that's why. Good you brought that up. I mean, that's why one reason why wrestling itself is not enough. Because they do have a bad habit of falling on their stomach and giving you their back. Sambo doesn't have that. See the difference? Right? Because you could get punched. So if a wrestler falls on his back, he lost. So when he falls, he's trained to fall on his stomach, which is a very dangerous habit for MMA, for street fights. So you're going to have to get rid of that habit. Once you do, wrestling is going to be very, very effective.
So the ground fighting in wrestling is basically limited to getting someone on the back and defending against being turned on the back.
There's a lot of ways of doing it. Oh, yeah, there's a lot of ways of doing it, but that's the whole point.
But there's no real submissions in wrestling?
No, there's submission wrestling. Have you heard of that?
Submission wrestling, yeah.
Yeah, submission wrestling, I have a lot of respect for. I think they're great. A little old school with their submissions, which I love, personally. Yeah.
But that's basically, you could kind of compare that to like Vale Tudo era style BJJ? Or
maybe,
how would you?
Maybe, yeah. Vale Tudo style, or like you remember the old days of Pride? Something like that.
I don't remember them personally, but I know the videos.
Whatever, yeah.
I wasn't born then. And do you think there's other disciplines in the standing game where you should talk about that are often overlooked?
What do you mean?
Like, I'm not sure. Maybe there's some people who I'm not sure if that's still a thing, where the first few UFCs still had like karate dudes.
Yeah. So look what happened to them, right?
That's what I'm asking. Is there something that people that MMA gained from that?
There is a few people who came from karate who did really well in MMA too, right? There's something to gain from everything. If you know how to adapt, there's something to gain from everything, for sure. But today in MMA, it's like, to be a good MMA fighter, a lot of people come from a different background, I would say, but you have to come from MMA background. You have to be good at striking, good at wrestling, and good at the ground. If not, the level is always going up. I think the fights today are much harder than the fights used to be.
And also, if you're competing in just one discipline, there's also a lot of stuff you don't learn to look out for. If you're just into grappling, then you don't look out for strikes. The worst issue with that is, for instance, if someone is in a mount position, in BJJ rules, I think it's 4 points usually, and that's fine. But in the street fight, that's death, because there's someone sitting on top of you. He can punch you. It's a very dangerous situation. So it's something where you get incentivized to keep away from in ground fighting, but it's not as harshly sanctioned as in a street fight or MMA, where you have a direct consequence of your action.
Exactly.
What do you think of like the more traditional martial arts? What do you think about Kung Fu?
What do you think about Kung Fu?
Yeah. Because the issue with Kung Fu is, every time I talk to someone about this, they're like, yo, no, because my style is different. I do this and that style. I've never heard of that one. So I have to Google it and I have to read up on it. And it's like, okay, So
what do you think about Kung Fu?
What I think about Kung Fu? So I'm not sure it's... You're putting me on the spot here. Okay, so my view on Kung Fu.
You don't have to answer it.
I can answer, but maybe the expert should answer.
I am not a Kung Fu expert. I have news for you. I'm not a Kung Fu expert. What do I think about it?
For MMA application?
No.
No? Okay. This was not like a spiritual question.
No.
What do you think about Kung Fu?
It doesn't work for MMA, that's for sure. Maybe for something else it does. I don't know. I don't think it works for MMA at all.
One big issue that I've seen with a lot of people who do Kung Fu, who then train in ICCS, for instance, I've seen that
they get their ass smashed.
And also they have this weird habit of, like, they retract their punches low. They have their hands on their chest when they don't punch, which is not really a cover. And that's something I've seen a lot.
That's why boxing is so important, keeping your hands up, for example.
I think there was this one, it was a Chinese man who was practicing MMA, and he went around and invited all of these like very high ranked
Kung Fu guys,
and he basically kicked all of their asses. Yeah. But then he was like sanctioned by the Chinese government, and he wasn't allowed to fly planes anymore and get credits because he. And then he had one of the fights where he was forced by the government to put on like traditional clown's makeup before he fought, just to degrade him. But he still kicked his ass. So it's like, so that much for Kung Fu.
Yeah. Okay. Good point.
Good point. With the whole elbow thing, that's pretty much something that came out of Muay Thai, right? Or elbow strikes? Elbow strikes.
I mean, Muay Thai are really good with elbow strikes.
So is that kind of the originator of where elbow strikes came from?
I don't know. I mean, they're good with elbows, but I mean, I could throw elbows without doing Muay Thai too. It just makes sense to throw an elbow in someone's face.
It makes sense, but I'm not sure if I've ever seen that somewhere else.
They perfected it. Yeah, I think they perfected it pretty good.
What do you think about like these Budo kind of things, like Aikido and stuff? Have you ever seen someone do Aikido in an octagon?
Oh.
No, not so far. I think there's one thing that I was pretty surprised by that I've seen someone in the UFC kind of hail from, which is capoeira, which I was surprised by.
You've seen it on a very low level fight. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. And also, look, there's people who do, like, they're very athletic.
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle of the fight, they're going to do like some kind of cartwheel. Or like they start playing with their hands like they're doing like Jeet Kune Do.
Mm-hmm.
But that's only because they could back it up if they had to. You see what I'm saying?
So it's just playing with your prey, kind of.
Exactly. It's playing and enjoying maybe the moment and giving the crowd something to enjoy, which is nice. But they could back it up with usually really good striking and really good wrestling, and that's why they could play. But come into the ring, come into the cage just with kung fu, and let's see how you can back it up. You're not going to back. Everyone knows you're not going to back it up, right? I think that MMA kind of burst a bubble in a lot of those arts. You know, before MMA, you would think people would go out of the movies thinking, kung fu, whatever. Wow,
there's no real way to test them.
Amazing, and all that, and I'm sure some people still do. But I think anybody who follows martial arts, like sport, MMA, stuff like that, you see, like, come on, man. And it used to be the beginning of MMA was, for me, a little bit more interesting than today because you had actually like a taekwondo guy walk in there with a taekwondo gi, against a wrestler, and he would get smashed. Mm-hmm. And you can see like what's more effective.
What's what, yeah. I think that's a big issue that there is today because stuff gets mixed. So especially, for instance, with you just talked about Jeet Kune Do. I've seen a lot of people perform well who practice Jeet Kune Do, but I'm never sure I've saw anyone who just practiced that.
Exactly.
So I'm not sure how good that is as a martial art.
There's elements in Jeet Kune Do like peeling and trapping, with their hands that they do pretty fast. But if you mix it with like boxing, mix it with good striking, there's some stuff you could use, but just that, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's people who basically come from? I know about Saint Pierre. He was in the I think in the Canadian military.
I don't know.
And he has that background, but still he is also an MMA fighter as well.
I don't know if he has a military background in the Canadian military, but that's not where his martial arts come from.
That's what I was asking. Obviously. Is there any like
There's a concept. People think, the guy was in the military, he must be a martial artist. Absolutely not. Okay. Stop thinking that because it's just not true. Mm-hmm. Most people who just train martial arts know much more than the average military soldier in martial arts.
In hand-to-hand combat.
Yes, exactly.
And also they're used to a lot of pressure if they fight or compete regularly.
Yeah, but so it's just it comes from, I don't know, maybe Hollywood, some rumors people think about soldiers, he must be an expert in hand-to-hand. No, they're not. Some places are better than others, of course, but most, they're just guys.
Mm-hmm. If you think about I know that the Gracies also have like this program for law enforcement grappling.
Okay.
And is that something where you think it's basically, or do these people focus on? You just said that in the last episode that the police officers or the law enforcement people you work with, they have to do a lot of grappling to be able to do restraint and control. Is that basically the same thing, or is it just also on the ground and that's why they have to train this way?
There's some stuff, there's similarities.
Mm-hmm.
The similarities, but I think that also, again, jiu-jitsu, it lacks and it has problems for police as well. I agree with that they should be doing it. Some of it, for control and restraint, it's very important for preventing violence also, because once you know how to control someone, you actually don't have to hurt him so much. So, and it could save lives on both sides. So it's very important. But to think that that's the only thing they need to know and like turn it into almost like a cult is total nonsense.
Mm-hmm. I think that happens with, I've seen this firsthand with jiu-jitsu or with luta livre, that people have this thing, this is basically the answer to everything.
Well, they have no striking. What about that? You can only control and restrain someone who's not like going crazy with strikes. Sometimes if that happens, you will have to hit him before you can control and restrain him.
Mm-hmm.
What about knife attacks? Right? And what about warrior development drills? What about teamwork? What about multiple opponents? Great example. Multiple opponents, what are you going to do? Jiu-jitsu on them?
Mm-hmm.
You could do jiu-jitsu on one person. One person. I don't care how good you are. Okay? Then what? So, like I said, it's lacking. It's not enough. And to think that it's enough, it's just wrong.
What do you think about this mindset of, especially for women, if they want to prepare for sexual assault, BJJ is enough? Like if you're a high-level BJJ fighter, then you're...
It's absolutely not enough. It's good, and it's a tool. It's part of it. But what about a little bit of situational awareness, for example? What about ground and pound? Right? What about that? It's one thing to do an armbar or triangle choke on someone who's like going slow on you or even going fast on you, but not really trying to hurt you. There's another thing doing it after you get punched in your face 5 times. Right? It's not the same thing at all.
There's way more aggression involved. It's about
you
breaking something.
You break your jaw, you break your nose, crack your eyelid, now do it. See the difference?
And I think that's something because you also said a lot of times that MMA is the closest thing that you can have to a real fight, to a real street fight. But I think that's there's still like this unspoken agreement where it's like it's not about completely injuring the other person. It's about fighting, sure, and it's about submitting the other person, but the goal is not to destroy someone. So I think that's something where people who perform one of these things and they feel like, okay, I'm prepared now, it's just something to keep in mind with, especially with preparation for street fights. And I think that's where the warrior development drills come in, because there's a lot of...
You're right. It's the closest thing, but it's still not enough. So if you had one thing to do, it's very good, but it's not enough because it's lacking in a lot of aspects that you need for a street fight, like multiple opponents, like knife fighting, and so on and so forth.
And so with control and restraint, you would say the way that you approach it is like a whole different... It's of course, there's a lot of grappling involved, but would you say it's like a whole different discipline, the way you treat it?
As compared to what?
As compared to just submission wrestling or grappling?
Yeah, it's called also experience. With control and restraint, there's also a lot of talking involved to the other person. There's a lot of de-escalating the situation, right? There's a lot of tactical knowledge that you need to have of controlling, restraining, and what does it mean to have someone under control. Taking someone down doesn't necessarily mean you have them under control. Sometimes, in fact, that just started, right? And there's, I don't have to go through everything here right now, but there's a lot more to know than just grappling. It's a huge part of it. It's one of the most important tools, don't get me wrong. So a lot of what we do is grappling, of course, because that's how you can control someone, bottom line. But before you get there, and as you're working there, there's a lot to know.
So it's basically the same as we talked about earlier, the MMA fighter compared to someone who is actually a very good street fighter. There's more to know, there's more to have.
If you take a person who's a great grappler, it'll be very easy to teach him what to know. Because I mean, that he has 90% of what he needs.
But it's not everything that's...
It's not everything. No, it's not everything.
So is it mostly communication, or what different areas do you have to focus on? It's not that deep, but what stuff do you have to focus on when you teach control and restraint that most people might not think of when they say, okay, BJJ is the go-to move for control and restraint?
A lot of things, for example, identifying suspicious behavior, identifying suspicious body language, teamwork, crowd passing. Okay. Not only that, I call it knowing your customer. Basically, knowing what kind of person is standing in front of you. Maybe you could prevent a fight just by knowing that. So knowing what to say, what not to say, knowing how to say it, a lot of things.
So basically, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about is also pre-fight. It's not just about the fighting itself.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of stuff is also, you have to focus on the responsibility, like what is your job there? Because a lot of people don't see this, especially when you teach people in a control and restraint setting. Usually people would maybe want to get away from a hot situation, and that's what we teach in self-defense or in self-protection courses. But with those people, they kind of have to go in towards the dangerous situation.
Right, and that's have to keep the guy for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look at clinch fighting, you're looking for windows of opportunities, and it's a very short window, so it's short-term control, right? You have a window, boom, you take his back, or you sweep him, or throw an elbow or a knee. But control and restraint is you actually have to put the man down, right? You have to make sure he doesn't have any weapons. You have to tie him up. You have to stand him up in many cases. You have to walk with him. You're almost marrying the person.
Yeah. And how do you coordinate teamwork on the ground? Because in grappling, usually it's 1v1. How do you coordinate a team on the ground?
That's something that you have to actually see in training. Yeah, but that's a very big part of it, because if you're not coordinated with the person you're working with, in many cases you're going to bother each other. One pulls this way, one pulls the other way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the guy who's resisting is going crazy.
So you're standing in each other's way.
Yeah, he's just standing in each other's way. Mm-hmm. But if everyone knows their job, you know, you're number one, you're number two. I know what I do, you know what you do, and you know, you just go for it. It makes it so much easier. The guy's on the ground on his stomach really fast, under control.
And if people get advised roles, how can they still be flexible with? Because you can't really plan such an intervention, right?
What do you mean?
If people get assigned a role, you said you're number one, you're number two.
You get assigned a role, that means you're going to practice your role.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe for 5 minutes before your shift starts, but you're going to know what you're about to do, right? Why would you go to work in a place that might have a problem like that and not know what to do?
Mm-hmm.
That's stupid, don't you think? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people do it. Sorry, a lot of people do stupid things. But if you don't know what you're doing there, you're going to be in the way, and you put yourself and other people in danger.
Mm-hmm.
So most people don't do it, but you should definitely do it. Okay, you know, your shift starts. We're here from 8 until midnight, whatever. Okay, guys, you know, today, you know, that's your job. This is my job. Okay, let's talk about a few cases that might happen to us. What if this happens? What if that happens? Okay, we'll do this. We'll do that. Okay, anybody else have any ideas what might happen? Okay, no, let's start the shift.
Mm-hmm.
And during the shift, they should also practice, like, at least once, a scenario as if something happened. You know, they should, okay, if someone make up a scenario, okay, this happened, let's do it. Let's see what we do. You do that, and then talk about it.
Someone from the unit may fake something. Or
it must. Yeah, they must. You know, and let everyone know that it's not real, so nothing stupid happens. But they must.
So like with the drug sniffing dogs, where they have like a rewarding thing every single shift, so they don't lose the focus.
If they do or not.
They every time you leave the dog, you deposit something, so the dog has to find something, so it's looking for that thing.
The thing is, you have to stay professional, stay on your toes, and stay. So those kind of stuff should be done all the time. And also, your attitude, in my eyes at least, should be, you know what? Today something's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Today something's going to happen on my shift. I got to be ready. One of the most dangerous things that could happen is people get used to the same thing over and over again, same time, we eat the same time, we rest at the same time, we work,
especially on patrol or something.
And then you know, you just go into some kind of, like, you become like a zombie almost. And when something happens, boom, you know, you're not prepared.
Mm-hmm. So you prepare these people because you said they were assigned a role, for instance, but then you're not as flexible, right? Is this about prevention? Like, you start the interaction? Because if you're surprised, an attack is always...
So, for example, with control and restraint, who starts the interaction? Usually the person who started it from the very first. So let's say you have a problem with someone. You get backup. Backup stand comes over. He stands where he's supposed to be standing, which it will go through all that stuff. Again, things outside just grappling. Where you're even supposed to stand, how you're supposed to stand compared to your friend, stuff like that. And then, so usually the person who's going to take initiative is the person who started the whole thing from the beginning, because he knows already what's going on better than you.
Mm-hmm.
Unless the person coming in sees a danger, a specific danger, which in that case, he's going to shout out the danger he sees, so everyone knows what he's talking about, and go first. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Makes perfect sense, right?
Okay.
You don't have that just in grappling. Oh, we'll just grapple. Okay. And then what if shooting starts? What if it pulls a knife in the middle? You know, what if his friend comes, starts pulling one off behind? Who got his back? All these little things like that will get people killed if you're not ready.
Mm-hmm. So basically, these whole control and restraint things are a whole different topic. That's why you deal with them in pro, because they're not really adaptable to people.
If you want, maybe one day we could do like just an hour just about that, you know, because it's a huge topic.
But doesn't really fit in you, or maybe it doesn't really fit into like everyday life.
No, it doesn't. I mean, some of the basic stuff do, because maybe at your workplace or some kind of party you're at, your uncle got drunk and you don't want to knock him out. You just want to take him out of there without hurting them. So yes, some stuff are good. But then there's a lot, as you can see, I just gave a few little examples, but a lot could go wrong. Mm-hmm. If you're dealing with violent people, a lot could go wrong. I don't care if you're a jiu-jitsu black belt, right? And every time there's like things go viral, like, look how jiu-jitsu works. You see how he choked the guy out in a street fight? Okay, jiu-jitsu is the best. First of all, that guy was a professional MMA fighter, not just a jiu-jitsu guy. I'm giving you an example, okay? He choked him out. And what? Right? I can show you 100 videos where that doesn't work. Or maybe, what about world jiu-jitsu champion who got shot to death? Mm-hmm. More than once. Right? Or stabbed to death more than once. What about that cases? Again, so it's great, it's good, but it's lacking.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between a good fighter that's very proficient at one style or one discipline, and someone who is good at that discipline in general. That doesn't have to be a good fighter.
I think you heard me say this before. In my eyes, the way I see it, a person who's preparing for the real world has to be better than a person who's just doing sports, because there's a lot more to know, and his life and other people's lives depend on it. If you can't get someone off of your back in a real fight, you might die. Mm-hmm. And if you might die, maybe someone you're protecting might die. Mm. Right? If you don't know how to pass a crowd correctly to get to an active killer, to save the whole, I don't know how many people are in the church or in the mall or wherever it's going on, then a lot of people are dying. Just because all you did is, I'm a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. Okay. So it's great. Again, I'm repeating it so people don't get offended. It's great. You heard me, guys? It's great.
But it's not everything.
But it's not enough. Stop thinking it's enough.
I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have, is that a person that's very proficient at fighting, that also does a sport, a certain discipline, and is also very good at it, or is he good because he does that sort of discipline? It doesn't really work that well.
It comes together. You see, you have to do that and that and that and that to be the full thing. That's what I try to do in ICCS. That's the whole point. That's what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. Right? Okay, what do I give my students to be the perfect ultimate weapon? Grappling, striking, all that, and warrior development and awareness, all that stuff together, there you go.
And to respect the opponent, because a lot of people forget that for the lack of technique, aggression sometimes or a lot of the times makes up for it. Exactly. And that's why you have to be aggressive and technically sound.
But by the way, technique will never make up for the lack of aggression. So it doesn't go both ways. Yeah. It doesn't go both ways. Yeah. It's one thing to be a great grappler in the gym. It's another thing to be a great grappler outside when there's someone stabbing you or stabbing your buddies or shooting all over you or 3 people jumping on you. Mm. It's not the same thing. So it's great. Again, you hear me, guys? It's great, but not enough.
Yeah. And with aggression, I think that's where the warrior development drills did a lot for me to actually be able to practice that in like an environment where you don't have to hurt someone. Because I think the issue with a lot of people who do, let's say, MMA or something, it's still, as you said, it's still not the real thing. So sometimes people go out, they look for fights. And there's 2 issues with that. First one, it's ethically very tricky. And the second thing is you're not going to compete on your, like the people you pick fights with are not necessarily on the same level as you. So that's maybe something where, so the real life experience is hard to gain if you're not, and also if you are in the situation and you're not prepared, then it's also very dangerous. So it's like a hard thing to learn. It's a hard thing to get experienced in.
That's why, I mean, sparring is so important, because it's the closest thing to, MMA sparring, to a street fight, which is actually not really going to hurt people.
Yeah, I think those are great closing words. Would you like to add anything?
No, I think we're good. I think
we talked a lot. It was very. We talked a lot of topics today, but I liked it.
It was fun.
Okay, so people, guys, see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.